Good afternoon, everyone. I'm calling to order this meeting of the Cleveland Heights City Council Housing and Building Committee at 5:30 p.m. on Monday, March 10th, 2025. I'm going to call the roll. Jim Petrus here, Vice Chair Gail Larson.
Here.
And Member Anthony Maddox.
Here.
And we also have Council President Tony Kuda joining us this afternoon.
Here.
So first on the agenda, I'd like to just debrief, talk through our recent meetings with the local housing advocates. So I'd like to turn to the committee members and see if you happen to have any takeaways from either of the meetings, if there's anything in particular from those conversations that you think that it would be worthwhile for our committee to focus on and explore further.
I would say that I'm interested in exploring the question of escrow because there seemed to be a bit of understanding that can be a challenge when people are trying to sell their homes, and maybe we look at escrow especially if it's an investor purchasing or selling, that there needs to be some kind of financial commitment that those repairs are going to be done. In my neighborhood, point of sale still needs to exist. I just, as a tool to get houses that do transition from one purchaser to a buyer, I'm just not ready to let it go. It's too many people out there trying to get around the system, and it's not working for me at all. I want our families who may be buying their first home to be protected. So that's where I'm at.
Absolutely, I 100% agree. I think especially with the second issue you raised is that's our buffer. It's just a great buffer for a new family or the first time home buyer to be able to have that extra level of protection going into that and that level of awareness. To give you an example, in my home, that inspection saved us and it paid off. So we bought our house 7 years ago, but that inspector warned me that sooner or later, my entire boiler system was going to need an overhaul. And this is something that he stressed extremely loudly to us. And so it's something we were able to set aside and prepare for. And sure enough, 4 weeks ago, it went $25,000. But we weren't surprised, and we knew exactly what we were walking into, and we were able to prepare for that because of that inspection. So I couldn't imagine hearing something like that and not having that, that buffer there, that extra assistance to really prepare as a homeowner. So I can imagine as a first-time homeowner walking into a situation and you're encountering something like that, that could have been avoided had you had that. And so for me, I think it's just critical especially for our first-time home buyers.
I'm for the point of sale. If there's some modification that can be done, some type of, lien that's paid at the end if somebody can't afford to pay it in the beginning. I mean, if there's, and I don't know this, I know that Lakewood has a more more flexible version of point of sale. I mean, they've kind of gotten rid of it, but there's a version of it they've kept. I would certainly listen to that, but I don't think we should get rid of it.
Yeah, and like I said at the beginning of both of the meetings, having the meetings was no indication of any particular legislation that was going to be pursued. And I think that they were really good opportunities for us to hear and learn from local housing advocates, both real estate agents and others. And at this point, while I certainly understand that having the escrow, for example, might make it easier for out-of-town investors to purchase properties, I just do not see the benefit in eliminating it, and I wouldn't want us to pursue that. But maybe there are some specific policies in other cities that might be worth us considering. So I'm open to things that may come up. That being said, there was one thing that I heard in both meetings that I do think it's worth us taking a look at, and that is increasing the awareness of programs that people may be available or may be eligible for. So, for example, in one of the meetings, we saw an inspection report, and it was buried. Yes, there was a phone number in there that people could call to learn more information about programs they might be eligible for, but it was buried near the end of the report. And that our housing or our home preservation office has an excellent pamphlet, and if we were able to, for example, provide that to people as they're cited, it seems like more people would take advantage of them and reduce the burden that they're having to deal with. No one likes to be cited for anything, but if there's a way that we could potentially make it a little easier, then we should certainly do it. So that's one thing that I am interested in pursuing, and it also happens to be sort of one of the recommendations from the Racial Justice Task Force. So I think that that's something that would have broad support for it. And if people were interested and okay with it, I'd like to pursue.
Absolutely, information is invaluable in an investment as big as purchasing a home. Invaluable.
And I don't know if it's contradictory to say that, I would like to see more owner-occupied units and less LLC rental units for, single family and so on. But because I know the policy does make it easier for cash buyers.
Mhm.
So I think that's the place we got to look at, because I don't think we need more investment property in Cleveland Heights. I think we need more owner-occupied properties. So, we need to find that spot where we can make that happen, but not, what I mean? I know this sounds kind of pie in the sky, but, but not take away the point of sale that makes sure that these, the new owners have a place that's safe and, in good condition.
So Max, do you have any thoughts on pursuing something that might increase information?
I think anything that educates the public or gets more programming out there available to people, I think is better. The more knowledge is better. I can't tell you how many people who missed out on opportunities where they could have repaired or saved a home or found some other support simply because they didn't know. And that's something that you're just hearing all the time. So I think anything we can do to promote that, I think is a good thing.
Well, what about your legislation is there a way to piggyback onto the rental, the landlord-tenant law stuff?
I think that it's separate. So I think that that's specific to tenants and landlords. And that information I heard in an unrelated meeting recently that Assistant Director Butler was working on a draft for that pamphlet. But I think that the content in there is really separate from what would be given to a homeowner whenever they're cited for
Right.
something.
But I'm just thinking about landlords, I guess, I don't know, maybe this wouldn't apply to them, the programs. It
Yeah,
wouldn't apply to a landlord who has a single family house, right?
I'm not sure what the criteria for all of the programs are. Maybe it's the case that there could be one if someone has a duplex, lives in one side and rents the other.
Duplex, maybe.
I'm not really sure, but my understanding is that they do have a pamphlet already. So this seems like a really easy win. So if we can get this out there, make it conspicuous for people who are cited, then, it seems like a lot of people could benefit from that.
Yeah.
So would it be okay with people if I brought this up with Director Hanna to see if he happens to have any ideas, if he thinks that we should pursue legislation, or if there might be some other route to try to accomplish this? So,
I think I would rather see people get the information about the HPO before they get in trouble in those in court.
Yeah.
And if that can prevent people, especially owner occupied, because they had that information, they knew what their resources were,
yeah.
I'd be real much happier with that. So
And-
could I'm wondering if Assistant Director Butler would agree to possibly adding it too, if they don't already, the citation itself.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm hoping for. But you brought up a good point. Maybe it's the case that in a conversation with the mayor and Director Shantz, maybe they would be open to the idea of maybe including something in the newsletter periodically saying, as a reminder, we have these programs that are available, or maybe in the Focus magazine or elsewhere. Maybe they have other ideas for how to get that information out there in advance, proactively getting it out there so that people aren't learning about it for the first time whenever they're being cited. So I could reach out to them and see if they happen to have any ideas to proactively alert people. It's someone put time and effort into creating that pamphlet. It looks really good. We want to make sure that it gets out there, and people learn about that.
It's a great program, so.
Anything else on that topic before moving to the next item on the agenda? So the next item on the agenda is contractor debarment. One of the recommendations from the Racial Justice Task Force was that we consider having a debarment process. And in going through, reading through the recommendations from the task force, I asked the mayor if there were any that he wanted us to prioritize. And he happened to mention this one. And he noted to me that the county, for example, has a process, and that's what I printed out and shared with people. I reached out to the Office of the Inspector General of the, yes?
Someone just texted and asked if you explain what debarment is while we were talking.
Yeah, so-
Thank you.
So my general understanding with this is that if there is a contractor that has been found responsible for certain conduct, which could be defined, then they could be potentially prohibited from, for example, submitting bids or proposals to the city or doing business with the city. And so in my understanding is that the county's Inspector General's office oversees the county's program, and she is happy to answer any questions that we may have about their process. In talking with the mayor, there were sort of two different approaches that we potentially envisioned. So one is coming up with a process of our own and figuring out a way to administer that ourselves. Another approach is maybe deferring to a list that already exists, for example, from the county. So maybe we pass legislation that says we, are not going to accept bids, proposals, or do business with anyone who is on the county's list. And then it's really up to the county. We're deferring to their process. So we sort of get the benefit without having to do the work ourselves. So those are two potential ways forward. I wanted to print out this overview from the county's website of its process. I think that it's pretty clear to me. I could see myself getting on board with creating something like this, but I wanted to see what you all think.
Just initial thoughts. I think that anything that we can do to combine with the county, I think is going to be helpful for everyone. These are conversations we've actually had with a couple of municipalities about these lists, not just for the contractors, but for instance, some of these out-of-town investors, where if we have a list where we're seeing all of these municipalities reporting in these same issues, we can kind of get a better gauge of what's happening with these companies and across the county. So I think anything we could, and I know it's just Cleveland Heights if we were to work with the county, maybe. So will we just be lifting information from the list, or will we be able to add names to it? Because if we're adding names to it, I think it'd be extremely helpful if all municipalities would be able to do that. That way I can have a sense if someone's already acting crazy in Euclid or in Shaker Heights. I've got a sense of what I'm looking at here if the county was keeping that. But I didn't know what that process was. But I think anything that we can do to get regional information, I guess, about what's happening with these contractors, I think will be helpful. If not, I think we should definitely do something in-house. I think doing nothing, I just don't think is helpful. But I do think if we had a comprehensive list, I would be very curious to see if these are some of the bad players that maybe are everywhere. And I think putting them on some master list would be helpful, I think, for all of us as we're kind of looking to build relationships with people and make recommendations to our residents and things like that. But I don't know if that list is something that we can all update in, or if it's something that just the county just updates that, or if there's a way that we could feed information into it. Because if that's the case, I think it's an extremely helpful tool for us to be able to see what's happening across the county. But
yeah, I don't know whether the legislation allows for others to feed names in, but maybe it's the case that we could say, hey, there is this organization that did X, Y, Z. We think that it would be worth you looking at. And maybe it's the case from that. They might decide to add it to their list. But that's something that I could reach out to the Inspector General and ask for clarification on. Because, yeah, I think that if we could benefit from this without having to recreate the wheel, why not? Maybe it's the case that there's some organization that, did business like out in Lakewood or something. And, we're not aware of that. And they apply for something here in the city of Cleveland Heights, and we're not aware of their work because we haven't previously worked with them. It would be good to be aware of that. And one of the things that I like is that this isn't like an indefinite debarment. You know, there are, depending upon the circumstances of the cases, at least according to the county's legislation, there's a 3-year department, there's a 5-year department. And so, you know, it gives people an opportunity to get off of it and once again do business.
I've got a couple of questions.
Okay.
First of all, I don't remember seeing the discussion at the RJTF, Racial Justice Task Force, when they talked about this. If there were specific incidents that brought this to mind, that people had been mistreated, that came to the attention of the Racial Justice Task Force. I know people do bad things. I mean, I'm not saying they don't, but I'm just curious as to what the history was.
Yeah.
The next, I'm trying to think about the process. Could somebody be registered as a contractor in Cleveland Heights, but not at the county level?
I don't know, maybe.
And then the reverse of that is, we know there are contractors operating in our city who are not registered
At all.
at all.
Absolutely.
So if there's some kind of way that list, the people who are doing their work correctly and treating people fairly is here, easily accessible. And then the list where these folks, you don't really want to reach out to them, is easily accessible. Maybe we start to see an effect, I don't know, but it bothers me that our contractor list is so short, especially in terms of landscaping and yard work.
Yeah, and looking at the list on the county's website, this is, it looks about 20 long.
20
Yeah,
for the whole county?
yes. And so, you know, we don't necessarily have, I don't think that we necessarily have a list of good contractors, because presumably if you're not on this, then, you know, maybe you're okay to do business with. I'm not quite sure how, you know, like a preferred vendor list might work.
Cities do that.
Yeah.
They have a preferred
And
list.
that might be something else that's worth looking into.
It could be
But-
an incentive.
Yeah,
Yeah, and now that you're giving that number, there's no, not 20 across the whole county, so it wouldn't even give you an accurate portrait. So I'm wondering, is that list only triggered by a specific complaint? Because if that's the case, you know, how often does that happen? And do I need a certain amount to get on the list? And is there some type of hearing that stops it? Because that I can see how that could whittle it down. So I'm curious about how helpful it would be, because there's no way in the world there's just 20 bad contractors across the entire county. I think we have more than that in Cleveland Heights. So I'm just trying to think of how helpful it would be to utilize something, because I'm just wondering what their process is to get on it. Is it difficult? Is it just complaint driven? I'm just wondering, because it can't be comprehensive.
yeah, of course not. Everything I think depends upon, you know, someone speaking up, depends upon some sort of investigation and findings of an investigation. But, you know, that's not to say that only 20 organizations have been on this list. That's just as of right now. And I just counted, it looks like it's 25, but still it's a relatively small number. And it looks like some of these, the debarment start dates varied. Many of these started in 2022, but continued since.
You know, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I'm looking at section 50506, and I think that's where the issue comes in. It's the procedure. So yeah, there's a whole hearing and everything. So you don't know who makes it through there. Maybe the customer didn't show up or provide information, and so yeah, I'd be curious to see what we might make adjustments in terms of our process, and in terms of if we did something separate. But I could definitely see how that list is only 25, because you've got a couple of ways to get out of this or to make adjustments. So I could see that.
We could certainly envision our own process. We could even do research to see what other municipalities or counties might be doing. I do worry about the amount of work that it might create for our city staff. You know, I think about, for example, the benefit. I think, well, okay, we could easily just look at the list from the county and just decide, okay, you know, take that list into consideration when making decisions and choose not to work with some of the folks on that list if they were to submit proposals to the city. But if we were to get into the business of running our own program, it would be a similar benefit, but a lot more work. So I would definitely want the administration to be part of conversations if we wanted to pursue that
When you
route.
started out, you talked about possibly adapting or adopting the Cuyahoga County debarment process. It's very extensive.
Or
It's
deferring
obvious-
to them.
or deferring to them.
Mhm.
At this point, that would be my leaning, that, but we always mention that perhaps when in PSA's announcements, or we have it on the website under the contractor registration. I want to know how many contractors know they're supposed to register with the city. I mean, it kind of opens up a whole new arena, but I think your point about not taxing our staff right now is really important. And it'd be interesting to see what the IG says, whether the communities defer to the county, and how do they let people know that that's what the process is? That we still have a review process, it's just defined by the county instead of the city.
Also, under reviewing this, there's actually two options here. There's a debarment and a suspension.
Mhm.
And the suspension can go up to 12 months. And it says it's without additional review in 50507. So it looks like there's actually two things that you could do. The debarment looks like it takes a bit of a longer process, but just based on what I'm reading here in 50507, they can do it. They can do a suspension for up to a year, just based on the information that they have without any additional review. So that's interesting to me to see. There's really two processes, and maybe that in our case might be a little bit more helpful. But I don't know. I'd like to see how they were using that. And I guess my question to the county, and I don't know if they have this answer, would be how many people did you suspend versus being the bar? Because that might be a much larger list, you know? It's something they can just do. But it is interesting to see that they have both that suspension and the debarment as options. But they don't really spell out anything else unless I missed it about the suspensions other than in that section. It looks like that's it.
And why does someone get a suspension?
Suspension, yeah, that's what I was looking, what's the criteria, yeah, and is it that it's an emergency, it's so egregious, I'm just wondering if it's, yeah.
It's a really interesting document though, my goodness.
Cause it seems like the county would do that route a lot then.
Yeah, maybe that's where everybody.
Yeah, they just, yeah.
It's also less expensive for them legally to do it that way.
I mean, it cuts out all of those processes.
Okay, so in terms of questions, did I get these correct that we'd like to know if communities can add contractors to the list, learn more about that. How do they educate people and organizations on the process? How many organizations did they suspend versus debar, and the criteria for a suspension versus debarment? Any others?
You know what, 50508, I'm sorry, I'm stuck on this. If a contract is suspended by the Inspector General is later debarred by the Inspector General for the same incident, the duration of the suspension. So yeah, they can't, this is an entirely different separate process that they can use. So you can have one without the other. So I'm wondering if we can't do the debarment, or maybe that process is too complicated, what does suspension look like for Cleveland Heights? Because I think that is something that might be easier to do from our standpoint, especially since the county can do it for up to a year. I think that's more than an opportunity for a contractor to get their act together. Yep, it's a good slap. It's a good slap on the wrist. And so I know that the county hasn't separated them out, but I'd be curious if maybe just having a suspension process here might be helpful.
And maybe they have more information about what their suspension
Suspension.
process looks like.
Yep.
What's the criteria to be in that realm and
Yeah, interestingly, I do not see a list of suspended contractors. So maybe it's a case that there aren't any, or maybe it's a case that part of the difference is that that list is not publicly posted. But I will reach out and try to get clarification on that and share that with everyone. Anything else on that topic? So the next item on the agenda is scheduling the public hearing regarding commercial vehicles at residential properties. So I spoke with Councilwoman Russell. So at a certain point, I learned that zoning related issues typically fall within the Planning and Development Committee, and so suggested to her that we maybe do a joint hearing between our committees, and she was open to the idea, and I recently learned from her that she would be able to attend something that might be before a council meeting. So I wanted to see what might work for you all looking ahead. So we have a council meeting on April 7th and April 21st. Do you happen to remember what's the earliest time Councilwoman Russell's available? I thought that it was like 6.
No, 6.
Okay, so she did tell me that scheduling it immediately before a council meeting would work. So I'm not sure if maybe if we do a 5:30, if that might be something that she could swing once.
No,
Okay,
I know that's a no. Now, the exception is this coming this coming meeting that she's not gonna be at on the, sorry for that. Let's see, what's the date?
17th.
17th. We are starting at 5:30 that day. You'll see, when you see the agenda, you'll see why. But I think it's a no. I mean, that doesn't mean we can't.
Mhm.
It just means that she would really prefer, to be there.
yeah,
The other consideration for Vice President Russell is if you do schedule a meeting, let's just say we can't do it before a council meeting. But during that week is better for her because she often has activities with the other things that she does
okay.
in the off weeks. So that's just to keep that in mind.
So what about, so we have a council meeting on the 7th and the 21st. Maybe would we want to look at Tuesday, the 22nd?
Let me throw out one other possibility. We could do it at 6:00 and start the council, oh no, we can't start the meeting at 8 because it starts at 7. I mean, yeah, forget it. Sorry.
Rather than disrupting that, maybe a different day might work. What about Councilman Maddox? What might work for you?
Or are we still talking about the Tuesday possibly? Because I
Possibly.
can do that.
The 22nd? You, after 5:30, is that right? Okay, so maybe at 6.
Well, I just realized she can't do it during the day anyway, and the hearing wouldn't work during the day. I just realized, so yeah, that wouldn't work. I'm sorry.
So maybe propose 6 p.m. on the 22nd, April the 22nd, the day after the council.
Can you send out an invite?
Yeah, I'll follow up with her to see whether that would work for her, if that happens to work for her.
Are you anticipating that this would be just a joint discussion among the committee members, the two committees, and then discuss having whether or not we'll do a public hearing, or
I think this is for the public hearing,
this would be the public hearing?
right?
Okay, so
Provide an opportunity for folks to share any potential feedback. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're in favor of making particular changes to the existing code. But we did talk through some ideas about potentially making some changes to accommodate, some people, but just to hear feedback from community members.
That's good.
Okay, so I will follow up with her.
And would you have staff there?
Yeah, I would love for staff to join. And I would love to hear Director Zamp's perspective on, I know that he joined a meeting earlier this year, I think, where we briefly talked about it.
Yeah.
But providing an opportunity for people to share feedback could help to inform what we do. Is there anything in particular that we'd want to bring up during it?
I'm just looking for reactions because I know it's controversial.
Mhm.
It's very controversial, but we have to publicize it very well as well.
Mhm.
So people know.
Say something like, upon request, these committees are providing a public hearing. Please note that this does not mean that we are necessarily pursuing any legislation. It's sort of like disclosure.
But kind of how it evolved.
Yeah, but if you have any thoughts on this subject, you're welcome to come and voice those. Anything else on that topic? Okay, and the only other thing on the agenda is the other topic. So is there any other topic that anyone would like to bring up while we're here? Okay, well, with that, I'm going to adjourn this meeting at 6 p.m. So thank you for joining us.